hppodcraft.com
has produced this record from actual recordings made at sea.
The horrible conclusion which had been gradually obtruding itself upon my confused and reluctant mind was now an awful certainty. I was lost, completely, hopelessly lost in the vast and labyrinthine recesses of the Mammoth Cave. Turn as I might, in no direction could my straining vision seize on any object capable of serving as a guidepost to set me on my outward path. That never more should I behold the blessed light of day, or scan the pleasant hills and dales of the beautiful world outside. My reason could no longer entertain the slightest unbelief. Hope had departed. Yet, indoctrinated as I was by a life of philosophical study, I derived no small measure of satisfaction from my unimpassioned demeanor. For although I had frequently read of the wild frenzies into which were thrown the victims of similar situations, I experienced none of these, but stood quiet as soon as I clearly realized the loss of my bearings.
That is the first paragraph of a young 14-year-old H.P. Lovecraft story, The Beast in the Cave. You're listening to us talk about it here on the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At hppodcraft.com, I'm Chris Lackey.
And I am Chad Pfeiffer.
And we're still together in person.
We are.
I'm looking right at you right now.
I know.
It's really intense.
It's really intense.
Wow.
What's happening in that opening paragraph?
That opening paragraph is the guy gets lost in a cave.
Yeah.
That's it. See, I summed it up.
You did.
I can make it much more economical than Lovecraft can.
You can. In the last episode, we covered things that he'd written when he was 7, 8, 12. They were crazy and disordered. And here at 14, we could tell he's definitely developed a style.
This is definitely Lovecraft. I mean, it is an immature Lovecraft, but it's still definitely Lovecraft.
He's got that purple prose, which we heard read aloud by our friend Christopher Barnes.
Yeah, Kip.
Thanks, Kip, for doing that reading. You know, quick aside, I actually met him and we became friends because of Lovecraft. Heather, my wife, was doing a Second City show out in Alaska, and I went to go visit her. When I was on the flight back from Alaska, there were two portions to the flight. One was from Seattle to, it was a cruise. So I was in Seattle, went from Seattle to Reno. And on that leg, there was a girl who sat next to me who was reading the Bible the whole time. And she kept looking up and giving me disapproving looks, like no matter what I did. She seemed like she hated me. And she was in the window and I was in the aisle, and I was getting more and more, the more she read the Bible for whatever reason, that upset me more.
When
and
you say
more.
girl, how old do you think she was?
She was probably like 23, so she's a woman, I'm sorry.
No.
She was small in stature, so that's why I think of her that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, she got to Reno, she gets off the plane, and then this dude gets on the plane and he goes, "Hey, you're in my seat." And I usually sit on the aisle, and I was like, "No, I just rode the plane all the way in here." I was told jerk about it too. I was like, "This is my seat," and he showed me his ticket, and I was wrong. So probably the reason the Bible girl was upset at me,
you were sitting in
because I was sitting in her seat. She didn't want to say anything. I don't know, but I moved over and I took all of the anger I had towards her. Plus, I was like, "What? This guy's right all the time? I mean, one of these people, fine." And I'm sitting there. And his wife was with him and sitting across the aisle, which is why he wanted to sit there. Of course. But I'm sitting there stewing, and then he pulls out this ginormous H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, like it was
anthology.
The anthology.
It was the Necronomicon, that one. It's like the big black book. And starts reading it, and I'm thinking, do I bring it up that I do the show or what? Which of course I did.
Yeah.
Long story short, we started talking. He was in the middle of reading The Horror at Red Hook. So I actually sat next to him while he finished that story, which was very funny, you know. And then we talked about it a bit, got off the plane, he listened to the show, and we've been hanging out ever since.
Yeah. We've had pictures of him on our website. He's got a Cthulhu costume.
Yeah, he made that himself.
Yeah.
Last time Chris was in town, he showed up with the really cool Cthulhu costume. He's got light up eyes. It's really neat. You can see it on our site.
He's a really fun guy, and he makes some good booze.
Yes, he makes good booze. That's the one thing I need to, the plug I need to get in there. Kip is part of an organization called LA Ale Works. It's him and a partner, and they brew their own beer. They were originally home brewers, but now they're really plugged into the craft beer scene here in Los Angeles, and pretty soon they're going to run a Kickstarter so they can start their own brewery. But the stuff that he makes is outstanding. He makes sake, which is a form of like rice beer, actually, and soda as well, and it's really good stuff. So LA Ale Works, we're going to link out to their site so you can find out what's going on with them. And, you know, he's been asking me about making some kind of Lovecraft-themed beer.
Yeah.
So if anybody's got any ideas for a good title of some kind.
Yeah, but let's put that out to the listeners,
please write in on our Facebook page or just contact us directly and let us know what you think would be some good Lovecraftian ale names. And maybe we can get them to make one.
Yeah.
All right, back to the Beast and the Cave. He's lost, but he's very pleased with himself because he doesn't get too upset. That's what we learned in the open.
Right, he just keeps his cool.
Shades of the temple there.
Right, yeah, exactly.
In fact, he's so together that he thinks, if I have to die, you know what? This terrible yet majestic cavern is as good a place as any to do it.
I can't imagine ever thinking that about anything. Going, oh man, I'm going to die. This is, you know what? This is probably a good way to go.
It's probably a good place to go.
Right, yeah.
By myself in a subterranean lair.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, he has heard accounts of a colony of consumptives. What does that mean?
People with consumption?
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Who, see, I immediately thought of cannibals. I've been reading too much of this. I'm like, oh, they consume people. That's what consumptives are, right? Who taking their residence in this gigantic grotto, to find health from the air. I get it.
Right. Because it's, it's from a pure cave, I guess.
Sure. And instead they found death in strange and ghastly form, whatever that means. But when they came through, they saw their cottages and that sort of thing. I guess that was part of the tour.
Right, the people had lived there.
Now, this is this guy's own fault, right? He was with a group, and there was a tour guide. And he goes, I'm going to go check out some other stuff. and he left, and he got lost,
Right. But while he's lost in the cave, he hears something in the darkness with him. He thinks it's an animal because it sounds like kind of padded foot.
Yeah, like a cat or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not 2 feet, it's 4 feet. So he's pretty sure it's a mountain lion.
Yeah, some kind of thing that had gotten maybe trapped down here and had made a living off of whatever squalid cave creatures are down there. And he's thinking, man, I don't really have any way to defend myself. So he gropes around and he grabs a couple of rocks. He's got one in each hand.
Yeah.
And he's just there waiting in the dark because his torch has gone out. And hears that hideous pattering of the paws drawing closer. And there's a little section here that I thought was very Lovecraftian.
Most of the time, the tread seemed to be that of a quadruped, walking with a singular lack of unison betwixt hind and forefeet. Yet at brief and infrequent intervals, I fancied that but 2 feet were engaged in the process of locomotion. I wondered what species of animal was to confront me. It must, I thought, be some unfortunate beast who had paid for its curiosity to investigate one of the entrances of the fearful grotto, with a lifelong confinement in its interminable recesses. It doubtless obtained as food the eyeless fish, bats, and rats of the cave, as well as some of the ordinary fish that are wafted in at every freshet of Green River, which communicates in some occult manner with the waters of the cave. I occupied my terrible vigil with grotesque conjectures of what alterations cave life might have wrought in the physical structure of the beast, remembering the awful appearances ascribed by local tradition to the consumptives who had died after long residence in the cavern. Then I remembered with a start that, even should I succeed in killing my antagonist, I should never behold its form, as my torch had long since been extinct, and I was entirely unprovided with matches. The tension on my brain now became frightful. My disordered fancy conjured up hideous and fearsome shapes from the sinister darkness that surrounded me, and that actually seemed to press upon my body. Nearer, nearer, the dreadful footfalls approached. It seemed that I must give vent to a piercing scream, yet had I been sufficiently irresolute to attempt such a thing, my voice could scarce have responded. I was petrified, rooted to the spot.
Well, he's not that scared because he flipping throws one of his rocks at the thing.
He's not sure it's going to work out, but when the thing gets really close, terror-struck as he is, the spell breaks.
He's got a rock in each hand. He throws the first one. He misses it, and then it gets closer, and so he thinks, okay, yeah, I know where it's at. I can hear it, and he throws it a second time, and he flipping nails it.
Yeah, he nails the thing, and then he decides, I'm not going to try and kill this thing. I've got it out, so I'm just going to get the heck out of here. Right. And he makes a run for it, and he actually finds his guide. The guide spent about 4 hours looking for him when he noticed that he was gone from the group. So when he finds him, he says, look, there's this really weird, crazy animal back there. I think, first of all, he falls to his knees and he hugs the guy's legs. I think. He's just so happy.
Yeah.
And then he says, can we run back and check out this monster? They go back. They see the thing laying there.
Kind of from behind.
From behind,
He doesn't get a good look at its head or face, but it's not a four-legged creature. It's a man-shaped thing.
Yeah, it's an anthropoid ape of some kind.
It's white. It's got long, stringy hair, and it's white skin. Yeah. And he rolls it over and takes a look at its face, and it's a deformed human face.
Then fear left, and wonder, awe, compassion, and reverence succeeded in its place. For the sounds uttered by the stricken figure that lay stretched out on the limestone had told us the awesome truth. The creature I had killed, the strange beast of the unfathomed cave was, or had at one time been, a man.
So, and that's the end of the story.
That's the end of the story.
Feels very Lovecraftian to me.
It's got the devolved human beings, the giant cavern.
I mean, it's not particularly scary because, I mean, it's a little intense.
Yeah.
When the thing's in the dark and running around. That's an intense idea to think about being in the cave with something when you can't see
And I think we've talked about on the show before things that never got to see the daylight, how disgusting they become, pale and albino and nasty.
Right.
And I think we talked before about when I was cleaning up flood damage in the Mississippi, there were a lot of animals that came up, they got washed up that had been, maybe living in the rocks. That were albino, like albino cockroach-looking things and beetles and things that came shooting out that were just like, oh my God, animals I couldn't quite identify, sort of. I think they were all rats, but it was just like things move so fast. It was terrible. I saw some real monsters back then. But
it's a pretty cool, creepy story. I don't know if it necessarily should be shunned as a Lovecraft story just because he wrote it when he was so young.
I don't know. It's kind of better than some of his stories that he wrote later.
Yeah.
And I know I was saying that last week, but I meant that kind of ironically.
Yeah.
I mean, here I'm actually serious. It's kind of a good story.
I thought it was. And it's really short and it just kind of creates a bit of a mood and atmosphere. And it's a good, weird story. And quit being so tough on young Lovecraft because that one's a good one. Now to get tough on young Lovecraft.
This is something that he wrote a few years later, right?
Yeah, The Alchemist. He was, I think, 18 when he wrote this story.
And it shares some things with The Outsider and definitely shares some things with Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. Because it's this fella it's in France, and he's in one of these fortresses that's been around forever. Barons, counts, and kings have been defied from this place. Nobody's ever gotten through the gates. All invaders have been repelled. But things have changed over the years. The people that live there obviously have the title, but they didn't have the money to back it up. We know that's a little Lovecraft biography seeping in there, right?
Yep.
But also something that happens to a lot of nobility that over the years they don't have the incomes, but because they have titles, they can't go to work or do any merchant class stuff.
Like Lady Arabella.
Like Lady Arabella. So they get up in crazy real estate deals with people and that sort of thing. This guy, Antoine, is the last of the unhappy and accursed Comte de C. They don't say the name. But when I read that real quick, I was like, Comte de Chagny popped into my head, and I couldn't remember where that was from.
What is that from?
It's from Phantom of the Opera. Raoul, the hero.
Oh, okay,
is
yeah.
the Comte de Chagny, I think.
So is this supposed to be somehow connected to him, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's supposed to be connected, but he might have just sort of yanked it out of there. But I mean, it's a common title, so who knows?
Sure.
But anyway, Antoine goes on a little bit about what his childhood was like.
Within these walls, and amongst the dark and shadowy forests, the wild ravines and grottos of the hillside below, were spent the first years of my troubled life. My parents I never knew. My father had been killed at the age of 32, a month before I was born, by the fall of a stone somehow dislodged from one of the deserted parapets of the castle. And my mother having died at my birth, my care and education devolved solely upon one remaining servitor, an old and trusted man of considerable intelligence, whose name I remember as Pierre.
And that's what really struck me as it being like The Outsider.
Yeah.
Stuck in this ancient castle, reading old books. Got one old person to take care of him. And Pierre won't let him associate with other kids, he says, because of his noble birth.
Now, on his 21st birthday, Pierre tells him some stuff about his family, kind of lets him light in on what the heck's going on. And he finds out that his family has been suffering for many generations from a curse. And it's been handed down from father to son for years and years.
Since the 13th century.
Exactly.
In the 13th century, the castle that he lived in was that impregnable fortress that I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
And on the estates surrounding the fortress, there was a guy named Michel who had the surname Mauvais, the evil.
Great name.
Michel Mauvais. He had a sinister reputation. He was looking for the Philosopher's Stone or the elixir of eternal life. And he had all kinds of secrets of black magic and alchemy. And he had a son named Charles who was really into it as well.
Yeah. They were wizards.
They were wizards.
So when I read that made me think of the case of Charles Dexter Ward.
Absolutely. Old Michel was said to have burnt his wife alive as a sacrifice to the devil. And there are a bunch of peasant children who keep missing from the village. But, I will say this. Old Michel is kind of a bad guy for stealing children and everything, but at least he loves his son, and he's, getting him involved in what he's involved in.
He's
They're
a good
doing
father.
things together. So.
Yeah.
But what happens is one night, everybody freaks out in the castle because Godfrey, who was the son to Henri, who's the current Comte, goes missing. Well, they just assume that the necromancers did it.
Right.
Right.
Well,
or the wizards or whatever.
The wizards, yeah.
Yeah, they assume the wizards had something to do with it, and so Henri, with a search party, runs down. They bust in on Michel. He's busy over a big cauldron, Macbeth style, mixing up Eye of Newt and all that kind of stuff. Henri runs in there, he grabs him, and he kills him.
That's it.
But, unfortunately, some servants find Godfrey.
He wasn't dead.
Pretty much simultaneously to this event happening.
Yeah. So little Chuck, he flips out and he gives a full-on curse.
Yeah, he jumps out of the trees and he lays this curse on him. May ne'er a noble of thy murderous line survive to reach a greater age than thine.
Which is 39 years old?
32 years
32
old.
years old, that's right.
He pulls out of his tunic some kind of vial of something, which he throws into the face of Henri, and then he disappears behind the inky curtain of the night. And
all Batman style?
Yeah, all Batman style, and then Henri dies at the age of 32. Now, nobody finds Charles. As far as they know, they're never going to have to deal with these people again. But now, you obviously know what's going to happen. He has a son who dies at the age of 32. Right. He has a son who dies at the age of 32. This keeps happening, and it's always accidental death of some kind, a stone falling or an arrow hits a guy while he's hunting.
Right.
And at first, nobody really thinks through that it's going to be this curse, but obviously. And so once he finds out about this at the age of 21, obviously his life is pretty dear to him because he's only a little over 10 years away.
Yeah. And he's alone. I mean, he doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have children. He doesn't have a family.
But he also, because he had such a backward experience because of that he only read these medieval metaphysics texts.
Yeah.
He doesn't know about modern science or anything like that. He decides, well, I'll just rely on these texts again, and he goes in and he reads up on demonology, alchemy. He's doing everything he can to try and figure out how to stop this curse magically.
Right.
As he gets close to 30, unfortunately, old Pierre passes away.
Right.
He buries him, and now he's completely alone. And so he decides to start
exploring the rest of the castle because he's living pretty much in this one tower because it's the only part of it that's really intact and livable.
And when he was a kid, he was just scared of the rest of it, basically. Yeah.
But now that he's a grown man, he thinks, okay, well, maybe I'm going to see what else is in here. What else am I going to do? I got a lot of free time on my hands.
Exactly.
He starts exploring this place, and he finds a trap door.
Yeah, he calls it the culminating event of his whole life. He goes down an old staircase, and in the lower levels, he finds some kind of... it's either a storehouse for gunpowder or a medieval place of confinement. By the way, that reminds me of Usher as well.
Yeah.
You really love that story. So as he's looking around the passageway, that's where he finds the trapdoor in that room. And he opens it up and it reveals this aperture. Noxious fumes come out, which cause the torch to sputter. This is all great Lovecraft stuff. He lowers his torch to the depths and he sees, okay, there's some stairs. He goes down. It's a long passage. And at the end, there's this massive oak door. Everything's really moist and damp down here.
And the door opens up without warning.
Well, but he tries to open it. He can't get it open. When he turns to leave.
Oh, right. Then the door opens up.
Yeah, which
Excuse me.
I
Yes,
thought that was actually kind of creepy when I was
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's almost like he stirred something in there. And this is where things kind of go a little downhill for me in this particular story.
This is where it gets really good for me.
There's a dude standing there in a medieval tunic and a little skull cap, and he's got long flowing hair and a beard.
He basically looks like the guy from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah, that's what I thought of when I read it too. You have chosen wisely. That guy,
now, luckily, our character, having only been educated on medieval texts, knows how to speak that bastardized, debased Latin that was flying around between the educated people in the Middle Ages. So he can actually communicate with this guy. I really wish I could see how the conversation started. I mean, how did they get into this? Because all it says is immediately this bearded guy just starts telling him these stories and boasting over how Charles Mauvais had escaped into the night after placing this curse. How did the conversation start?
Who are you? And he said, hey, I'm a guy that hides in a room.
But first, let me tell you a story.
Let me tell you a story. And then there's lots of, that kid escaped, and then there was lots of deaths, and well,
I don't know.
I had something to do with it. I don't know.
He talks about the curse.
Yes.
And then he says, you're going to die soon. Right. Now, I assume that it's because he's the last of his house that he's getting this information. But the guy comes out and says, there's a curse on your house, you're going to die soon, and the reason is because of the wrong perpetrated by your ancestor against old Michel Mauvais, and it's Charles Le Sorcier who's getting the revenge. And then he tells of how young Charles had escaped into the night and returned 30 years later to kill Godfrey with an arrow.
Right.
So suddenly this curse starts...
It's not as cursy as it is.
Yeah, it starts falling apart. And then he tells how he had seized Robert, son of Godfrey, in a field, forced poison down his throat, and left him to die at the age of 32. Robert was the grandson of the original offender. And then the narrator's a little puzzled. How did the curse get fulfilled by Charles? Because he would have died.
Yeah, he would have been way too old. Well, anyway, he attacks him. Let's cut to the chase.
Let's cut to the chase here. Yeah, that's right.
The guy, the stranger guy attacks him.
He's got a glass vial.
Right, and our guy just kicks his ass basically.
Yeah, he throws his torch at him.
Yep,
and it sets him on fire.
Yeah.
So the guy's plan to reveal himself on the last person is probably a bad plan because he's so old and frail. His clothes have got to be so flammable if they're still from the Middle Ages.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, so he throws the torch at him and he just bursts into flame and burns down, and there's a lot of florid Lovecraft stuff here, but basically the guy burns to a crisp. However,
suddenly the wretch, animated with his last burst of strength, raised his hideous head from the damp and sunken pavement. Then, as I remained, paralyzed with fear, he found his voice, and in his dying breath screamed forth those words which have ever afterward haunted my days and my nights. "Fool!" he shrieked. "Can you not guess my secret? Have you no brain whereby you may recognize the will which has through 6 long centuries fulfilled the dreadful curse upon your house? Have I not told you of the great elixir of eternal life? Know you not how the secret of alchemy was solved? I tell you, it is I that have lived for 600 years to maintain my revenge. For I am Charles Le Saucier."
What?
it's a horrifying revelation.
It's the guy that I kind of thought it was immediately. That's the revelation. Oh no!
That's the revelation, and that's the end of the story.
That's the end of the story. Yeah, this is just a crazy story. And
do you think? Because he was saying all that stuff at the end after he'd been burned.
Wow. Yeah.
His charred and shriveled figure.
Yeah.
So, did he have lips?
Yeah. No, his lips must have been burnt off.
Can you not guess my secret? Have you no brain where you may recognize the will which has had 6 long centuries? Actually, he does have lips. The cracked lips tried to frame words which I could well not understand.
I kind of liked that Skeletor type voice you're doing there.
Have I not told you of the great elixir of eternal life?
That's good. That's good stuff. So, interesting way to use a curse. If the guy had enough magic mojo to live for 600 years, you would think that he would have enough magic mojo to keep a simple curse like this.
Well, it's not
going.
a curse. Here's the funny thing, it's not a curse.
Why would, I mean, sure it's a curse. But he said something was going to happen, and then it happened.
Yeah, but a curse needs to be... Like, if I told you...
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm cursing you. Every night at 10 o'clock when you lay in bed, you're going to get a headache. Uh-huh. And then every night at 10 o'clock, I snuck in the window and I punched you in the head. Is that a curse?
Well, yeah. I think it's a curse. I mean, it's the method of delivery that you're talking about here. You're going to look up curse. Okay, look it up.
I mean, because then, when have you ever read a story about a curse where you're like, we stopped the curse by finding a guy and kicking his ass?
I haven't read a... Does it have to be supernatural? Is that the thing with the curse?
A curse is any expressed wish that some form of adversity or misfortune will befall or attach to some other entity.
Okay.
In particular, curse may refer to a wish that harm or hurt will be inflicted by any supernatural powers, such as a spell, a prayer. All right, well, something supernatural is going on here.
Well, he's old. Yeah, he's living supernaturally long.
Right, but
I know what you mean. It's not a curse.
it's not technically a curse.
Well, no, I think technically it is a curse, but I think, by the letter of the law, it's a curse, but it's not actually a curse in the spirit. Like, as in it should be this sort of mystical energy force or incredibly bad luck that should befall the person,
right,
and not actually a malevolent dude.
Yeah,
that's just causing mischief.
But the curse really is just praying or appealing for evil and misfortune to befall someone or something. So I just so if
well he did, and then he made sure it happened by actually doing stuff.
Curse you!
I'm just but still, yeah, it's kind of a letdown of a story because it's pretty cool, and then the ending is just kind of like.
But I laughed out loud when I realized that was going on. When he's like, "Haha! Look how it all worked out. I hid in the bushes and shot an arrow at him. My curse was genius."
What a horrible way to live 600 years and spend all your time just lurking around waiting for guys.
30 years. You waited 32 years at a time.
Well, not necessarily, because if a guy has a kid, he probably has a kid when he's maybe 20 or something like that. So then it would be...
Oh, you're right. Sure.
You have to wait a while longer. It wouldn't be every 32 years.
Yeah, you're right.
It would be, so if
Yeah.
he's 20, then... But still...
But you know what would be funny is if in those, while the time passed, he didn't stay in the, he didn't stay at the, he didn't stay with the family in that secret room that we found him in. He went out and he lived his own life. And then every time we go, oh man, that kid's turning, I got to go back there, put my medieval gear on. I got to shove some poison down somebody's throat. That would make a really good movie, actually.
There's
why are you always disappearing every 32 years?
Well, I got a curse that I got to fulfill.
It's either me or the curse. I love you. I have to go.
It's a romantic drama. That's not how I was.
You don't understand. Yes, I'm immortal, but I have to go.
Yeah, I would have been a better story if we got to see Charles' side, Chuck.
Hey, that story could still be written.
Yes.
These are good, though. These are pretty good. I think I like the really juvenile stuff a little better than these, but
it's a lot more fun and more unpredictable. But,
yeah.
But I actually enjoyed the...
I like The Beast in the Cave.
The Beast in the Cave. I thought that was a good Lovecraft story.
That was a good Lovecraft story.
Yeah.
And the second one was a good bad Lovecraft story.
Yeah.
It had like the really silly thing at the end that doesn't quite make
I'm glad
sense
we
when you
covered
think it through.
I'm glad we covered these as kind of being completists now, because now we actually have hit all of his pros.
Well, we didn't cover that Siametti stuff, which people still
we didn't do
ask
that.
about.
Well, we covered it.
They told us we couldn't.
Right. Right. Well, no, they didn't tell us we couldn't. Somebody was posting on our forums excerpts from the story, and then they gave us you better take that down or we're going to sue you.
Yeah.
And I've heard they're very litigious, the people that have it. But actually, from a legal standpoint, we are allowed to even read excerpts on our show and do it. But the stories aren't available to everybody out there, and that's why we didn't do it. I bought a book that has them in there, and we've read them.
And we did talk about them on
and we did
episodes.
talk about them. We covered them. We just didn't do any excerpts from them.
Yeah.
So now we've officially covered all of Lovecraft's prose.
Yes, we've nailed it.
That's it.
We're done.
And so, I'm going to just quit the podcast. So see you later.
No, we have more to do.
Like what?
Well, I'll tell you. We have on the schedule a story by a Mr. Rudyard Kipling.
Never heard of him.
Well, he's a very famous British author, Chris. So.
What's he written?
He wrote The Jungle, which is a very popular book about the Industrial Revolution.
No, that's Upton Sinclair.
Oh, you do seem to know a little bit about this.
I just know who wrote that. I don't know who this Kipling fella is.
Kipling will be an interesting thing to tackle because there's a lot of backlash against him as well.
Why?
Well, because he was a British colonialist, and a lot of his stories are set in India and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of similar to Lovecraft. He's probably one of the best storytellers in fiction, but there's a lot of folks who are like, screw that guy because of what his attitudes were. So it's that, do we judge somebody by history kind of thing that happens. Right. But Mark of the Beast is the name of that. I'm excited about it because I haven't read a lot of Kipling, that he's very good at writing these scary horror stories. And then, similar to how we thought we were going to do Lair of the White Worm, we're going to cover something longer for the next... That's our free show, right?
Yep, that's the free one.
The Mark of the Beast is our free show?
The free show will be open to everybody, anybody that wants to hear it. There you go.
And then we're going to cover...
For our subscribers, we're going to cover The Werewolf.
The Werewolf by Clemens Hausmann.
Which I hear is a very good story.
Yeah, and it's also about a werewolf.
It's about a werewolf.
Which we've never really... there's been loose talk about the ghost of a werewolf, that kind of thing on the show.
I was going to say, wait, we did talk about a ghost werewolf.
But I'm really excited about this because I love werewolves so much. And this is a story from 1896, so I'm sure it's going to be some OG stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. I'm looking forward to that and to the Mark of the Beast.
Listen closely.
Well, it's been good to actually be sitting in a room with you to do this.
Yeah, dude, I'm sorry I'm going to have to go back to England. Well, I'm not. Sorry, but I'm sorry to...
We'll be back to the Skype.
Yeah.
The Skype relationship.
There is talk that we might be doing a live show this summer, but we're still trying to work that out and see if we can make that happen.
Yeah, but there's going to be a convention in Providence. When we know more, we'll say more, but our plan is to perhaps do an American live show. An American live show. In Lovecraft's hometown. So hopefully that'll happen. We'll tell you more about it next time. With that, I'm Chad Pfeiffer. And I'm Chris Lackey, and you've been listening to the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast. At hppodcraft.com.
Fool! He shrieked. Can you not guess my secret? Sorry.